So we're heading into the next season for Destiny 2. A lot is changing and we've got plenty to talk about in this here video. Once again, I've been doing some digging and we're going to round up everything going down for the game. Some cool stuff, some not so cool stuff, a bunch of interesting secrets, and what people are saying about Destiny 2 these days. So a lot of polarizing topics as usual, but we've got a lot to get through. Hit the thumbs up if you're feeling generous on this particular day. Let's get into it. So let's begin with a whole bunch of moon secrets that Bungie has been hiding in plain sight for about 5 years now, as crazy as that sounds. The first one I want to talk about is to do with the Destiny 1 classic map called Anomaly. We've been running around here since 2014, had many Charles memories here, but the whole time nobody's actually known what the big thing in the middle actually was. All the original lore page said was that the place was called the K1 Station, which sounds familiar, and it gives off electro waves that messes with people's brains. Nobody's been able to scan or open it, and Rasputin once crashed a warsat on a Titan's head for trying to punch it open. That's a true story. And also the Hive are trying to access its mysterious power, which is no surprise. But in Shadowkeep, we actually found out, finally for the first ever time, what is inside this thing, and it is very strange. I feel like it's one of the more interesting stories to come out of Shadowkeep, but it isn't that widely known about. Probably because it was snuck into the collector's edition, which of course not many people actually own or even read, to be honest, but we're going to get to the bottom of this and find out what is inside this thing. So for this, we've got to take it all the way back to the Golden Age to briefly summarize what happened, but some scientists were tunneling deep below the moon's surface. They found a room containing a black sphere that was placed on top of a pillar, and they broke it when digging in there, but turns out this artifact had been buried on the moon long before the Traveler even arrived, and it might be as old as the moon itself, which doesn't make too much sense, but this thing is very old and very strange and very alien from what they found. Their first reaction was that it was a beacon that might have brought the Traveler here, and then they figured out it was actually plugged in and communicating with something far across the universe over the 6th dimension. Now, at this point, they were certain it was speaking to the Traveler's homeworld and other Travelers, which is pretty crazy. We've never, ever heard in the history of Destiny anything about there being more Travelers or them having a homeworld, but meanwhile, this sphere they found was also continuously giving off dangerous radiation levels, and just being near it was turning the team insane. They're having nightmares and terrors, hallucinations, and dreams of dark visitors. Some of you can probably guess where this is going, but they then built a replica device to try and mimic the original, which we're not sure what happened to that, but then Clovis Bray, the company funding this and basically in charge, they moved the original black sphere to this site, which we now know is the Destiny 1 map called Anomaly. So they sealed the artifact inside this specially armored container, basically a big engram, which also makes sense because Clovis Bray also invented the engram, so it's their technology, but under this armor is actually still to this day the mysterious sphere, the black orb they found deep in the tunnels, still trying to pierce its way out. They talk about these black liquid spikes that were poking out of the container, which you can see in the images here in the book, but I think the most interesting part of all of this is the scientists said it's only a matter of time before it will eventually break out of this container. The actual team that worked on this device and containing it said it won't hold forever and it will violently burst out one day. Now, at this point, most of the team had been driven pretty much insane by the sphere. The commander journaling all this starts quoting things the darkness has said. She's drawing black triangles in the journal. You can see she ends it by saying there's no veil over her eyes. There's the word veil again. And the very last thing she said was, she will bow to me, which is super interesting. Either talking about the Queen, who famously doesn't bow to anyone, or maybe even Savathun. So this whole time, the team were convinced that this device was linked to and communicating with the Traveler and the source of the light. Turns out it was the complete opposite, and it was actually a device left by the darkness to spy on us and send information to the pyramids. Shortly after this, the collapse happened, the pyramids arrived, destroyed everything, and it's heavily implied that Clovis Bray, the shady corporation behind this, kind of caused the collapse in a way by moving the black sphere, trying to replicate it, and then, more importantly, sealing it away in this container and trying to block its communications, which was very important. I guess that might have tripped them off. Something the team was actually correct about, and Eris now tells us that the sphere is a sort of beacon. She flat out says that it was left on the moon to watch and whisper about us to our true enemy, of course being the darkness. So it is crazy how this team found this artifact and they were so convinced that it was speaking to other travelers, because nobody back then even knew what the darkness was. This was the Golden Age and they didn't know that messing with this sphere would eventually cause the collapse. But at the same time, they might also not technically be wrong. I mean, there are a lot of theories that the Traveler came from the same place as the Darkness, so it could be speaking to the Traveler's homeworld, which just also happens to be the Pyramid's homeworld as well. Now, interestingly enough, I remember Prince Aldrin also had a similar theory about the Black Heart, and he said he thought it was a tripwire left by the Darkness to alert them when the Traveler gets too strong. So, very similar sounding to what the researchers and Eris are saying about the Black Sphere. There is also, of course, a massive similarity to the whitish sphere that the Pyramid gave us on the moon recently at the end of Shadowkeep. It is, of course, different to the black one that's locked up on Anomaly, but this unknown artifact that we got is also a communication device that was speaking to the darkness in the Black Garden in the raid. So again, definitely related, but not the same thing. All we do know is that these spheres and traveler-like shapes and objects definitely seem to be important to the darkness somehow. They're in basically every single concept art or area we see them in. I'll be interested to see if maybe we'll return to Anomaly because of this. I mean, it's got one of the most important items in the entire system still locked up to this day, where it will eventually break out. I mean, story aside, we know Bungie is no stranger to repurposing old content. So you got a perfectly good Destiny 1 Crucible map, also set on the moon. We didn't get any moon maps in Shadowkeep, so it could be a perfect kind of coincidence. I mean, we did see First Light turn into a PvE area for the first mission, which is the same area as this Anomaly map as well. So it is very possible, maybe an updated version and the Anomaly is missing or it's got a hole in it now. Either way, though, I thought it was very interesting just how this map has got this massive secret locked up on it that relates so closely to what we're seeing now in Shadowkeep. Now, this brings me on to the next mystery I wanted to mention, which is another pretty big question we've had about the moon since like 2014, which is what caused those massive cracks on the moon's surface. I remember it was initially said that Crota's sword had apparently cracked the moon every time he swung it. Then it was said that the hive tunneling deep below the moon's surface caused the cracks. But now in Shadowkeep, Toland is saying the pyramid actually caused the cracks, which makes a lot more sense and also explains why the hive are even tunneling there in the first place. Eris has talked about how the hive are trying to get close to its powers, they're trying to dig towards it. We also know the hive use these massive worms to tunnel deep under the moon. We haven't seen any live ones yet, but there are a bunch of huge skeletons all over the place. Even in the new dungeon, you can see more of these huge skeletons and rib cages from these massive worms. Probably not the worm gods or anything like that, but maybe related to the one on Titan, for example. Either way, though, now with all this pyramid stuff and Toland saying it, it does make a lot more sense why the hive are actually digging under the surface of the moon. They also built Scarlet's Keep, the big red thing over the pyramid, to be close to it and shelter themselves from its powers, but as you can see, this is also right where the huge crack is, so it does all line up, and the pyramid, of course, is directly under there. It is still a mystery how it even got there or why this one specifically got left behind. Maybe it's the new beacon to replace the old one that we locked up. Maybe it was looking for the Black Sphere. Maybe it crashed or shot down as Fenchurch said he saw in a dream after touching some of it. But either way, still a lot of questions and hopefully some that get answered soon. So next up, we've got a quick update on the PlayStation 5, something pretty cool to see, but a while back, I talked about how the official announcement from Sony was made that the PS5 is coming next year. All we had at the time were CGI renders of what the dev kit supposedly looked like. It was easily one of the strangest looking consoles we've ever seen, but now we actually have a real-life physical version to prove it's real. This is the image that came from Twitter from a developer who I guess just didn't mind posting it, but you've got two of the enormous and really weird looking systems right there, and these are what most game devs would have in their studio right now to make their games for it. It's also got a screen on the right there, probably some debug information, but once again, it does have to be said for people confused, this is not at all what the final PS5 is going to look like. Dev kits are basically prototypes that are often overclocked and different to the retail model. Funnily enough, on the right there, those are actually two PS4 dev kits stacked on top of each other. I've seen those many times at studios, but it goes to show how different even that looks to the real PS4. It's been said that the big V shape is apparently to represent the Roman numeral for 5 for PS5, of course, and also this design lets devs stack them on top of one another while also giving them room to ventilate. So it's actually pretty smart and explains why it looks like this, unlike those PS4 ones, which probably get a lot hotter when they're stacked up. But yeah, just a cool update to these consoles which are out in the world, and this is the first real-life image of the PS5. Now, Trials has been a very big topic recently, mainly because of its absence in the reveal, and Bungie in general has been fairly silent about all of it. A lot of people were hoping they might drop it in Dawn as a surprise, although they didn't give any hints or reason to believe they would bring it back. But for those wondering, the last official thing Bungie said on this was about a month ago. There was a post saying that it's been 14 months since they put Trials on a hiatus and 17 months since they killed off faction rallies, and Cosmo replied to this saying they have no new info on either of those topics. The team is aware of the feedback for Trials to return, which is putting it lightly, and also for factions and faction rally and faction gear to return as well. I'd almost forgotten about factions, to be honest, but you can add it to the same list as Trials, I guess. DMG also replied to a post more recently and said a similar thing. He emphasized that Trials of the 9 in italics is on hiatus and directing us at old posts where Bungie talked about it a bit more, and they did also reiterate how Elimination is going to be the permanent mode in Dawn, and that is definitely their way of testing the mode to see how best to do a Trials version. Now, before that, the most concrete and recent thing that Bungie said is that until they have a solid version of it, Trials is going to stay on hiatus indefinitely and will not return over the course of the next few seasons. They said when we have those new plans ready, we'll be sure to share them with you, but those are basically the latest things straight from Bungie, so it's still very much on hiatus. They aren't even slightly implying it's on the way or nearly ready. It is definitely still on pause. Honestly, these days, I see almost as many people wishing it would return as I see people wishing it doesn't. There are very mixed opinions on Trials right now as a mode. Obviously, both sides feel very strongly, no surprise, but some see it as the savior of Destiny 2's Crucible that might be exactly what the game needs. Others saying how the sandbox is just not ready for Trials right now, and adding it would only do more harm than good. So it is definitely risky. In my personal opinion, I do think nostalgia is definitely a lot more powerful than people realize. I've said this before, but Trials of Osiris was great because the entire era of Destiny it was in, not just the mode itself. I think it will be hard to replicate that 4 to 5 years later with an entirely different game, and I'll be worried about them bringing back Trials and people expecting to relive those House of Wolves days, only to then be turned off because it's not the same as they remember, which we kind of saw a bit with Trials of the Nine. Again, I think Bungie is well aware of that, and I think it is why they're treading so carefully around it, rather than putting out a half-baked mode and diluting what was one of the most successful modes in Destiny history. I mean, it kind of carried Destiny 1 through its slowest times, and it was the staple mode that guaranteed just millions of people logging in every weekend. Even in like year 3, it was still so popular. I think it's also why it's being extra missed right now in Destiny 2, because you can definitely notice the gap of it missing. So in the meantime, we'll see what elimination is like in the new sandbox, but let me know where you guys stand on this. I know it's a very hot topic right now, but Trials definitely doesn't seem to be returning anytime soon, which to most people is probably bad news. So next up, let's talk about some new stuff, what's next for Destiny, and what are people thinking of it so far. So from what I've seen, the player base is kind of split from the Season of Dawn, which is definitely a very common thread here. Player base is being split, but you have a bunch of people who quite like playing Destiny casually and pick it up every now and again, and you can play other games or just do something else with your time. But then you also have people who want to grind out Destiny all day, every day, and want to dedicate a bunch of time to it, but obviously can't right now because there isn't that much content. Destiny 2 is kind of in slow mode right now. They're obviously trickling a lot of content. A lot of the content is arguably recycled. So right now, if you're a hardcore player, there isn't that much to do with the game being like 2 years old now. Bungie aren't really adding a whole bunch of new stuff these days. It's more about repackaging and kind of repurposing what's already there or maybe underutilized into something more playable, which does make sense from a dev perspective. They've said how the Activision split heavily reduced their workforce, and obviously they can't output as much. But again, for hardcore players, there isn't that much to do, and it might not be that exciting, so I can definitely see a lot of the frustration there. I think what's also adding on top of this is the fact that PvP is not in a great place right now, and Bungie has openly talked about it. Crucible's not where they want it to be, and they want to eventually focus on restoring it, but normally in Destiny, Crucible is what you'd play when you run through all the PvE content and you wait for the new stuff or the next DLC. So I think that's why you're seeing so many people overly frustrated with Crucible, especially because it's supposed to be that fallback mode when Destiny is in a slow period. Now, on a lighter note, I do think it's pretty cool what they're doing with Saint 14. He is definitely one of the most legendary characters in the game, and I think lots of people have said before how it's disappointing to never see these actual characters in-game and in action. The amount of times they die off-screen or you arrive too late to meet them. This time, though, we're basically using Osiris' time machine to just pull Saint 14 out of a timeline where he is alive, and then he helps us, or the other way around maybe, but then he'll disappear again after that. Of course, he is not going to be a recurring Destiny character in this game. He's not going to stick around or be alive, technically. For this idea, I think it fits pretty well because of the whole time travel thing. You get to meet Saint 14, see him in action, but in the normal Destiny timeline, the one we're trying to save and revert, he is still technically dead. We're just going to go to one where he isn't and borrow him for a little bit. So it's a pretty clever way to kind of revisit the character temporarily because of the whole time travel thing. So next up, we're going to rapid fire a bunch of changes in the new season that I thought were noteworthy. Firstly, the Anarchy is getting its drop rate increased from 5% to 10%, which is pretty cool. I still don't have the weapon, so it'll be nice to hopefully maybe see it one day. All exotic engrams are basically becoming fated engrams, which is very cool. Both the power and pinnacle level caps are being jumped up by 10, which is not really being received that well. A lot of people aren't happy because it is more grinding and pretty much 0 rewards. It's not a great thing, but get ready to start the level grind and infusing stuff all over again. Bungie's put 4 Crucible maps back into the bin, so Dead Cliffs, Legion's Gulch, Retribution, and Solitude, in favor of Emperor's Respite, Equinox, Firebase Echo, and Vostok that have been taken out the bin. Honestly, I don't think anyone would mind if all 8 of those were deleted, but now we do at least have Rusted Lands, which does make up for it, and maybe, hopefully, they'll add the Anomaly soon. I want to see the artifact and what that's doing, but this is also a list of things going away either forever or a very long time, which is definitely worth knowing before the season ends if you've still got some time. So, of course, the Season Pass rewards, the Ariana's Vow, and Catalyst, which will be available at some point in the future, but again, will be going away. The Vex offensive mode is going to be completely gone, and of course, Vex invasions on the moon, and the weapons, the data seas, and Akora stuff. And of course, also the Gate Lord's Eye, the seasonal artifact, and the Triumph seals and titles for the season. So that is all the stuff going away as we go into Dawn. So I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did at any point and want to express your happiness, then feel free to do so using that like button down below before you go. If for whatever reason you are not subscribed to the channel, you can easily fix that by hitting the red button and also the bell if you want to know immediately when my new videos are out. That's enough talking from me. I massively appreciate all of you guys for watching every video to the end and showing crazy support. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all very soon with some more stuff to talk about.